we're going to be talking a lot about business transition planning. Now, there are many in the audience that understand exactly what that topic is, and there are many that don't. Perhaps in a simplistic way, you can explain what is business transition planning.
The business transition planning, and also sometimes is called business succession planning, same thing. It's basically what will happen to your business when, not if, you're no longer there to run it. And that's important because there will come a day that you will not be there to take care of your business. And if you don't plan ahead, then you're leaving behind a very complicated situation for those behind you. For those who love their family, and they love their business, and they love their employees, they owe it to them to make arrangements so that when they're gone, there will be an orderly process to keep the ball rolling and to keep that business going. I can share with you an example. I worked with two guys who were 50-50 partners in an oil and gas business, and the first one of them died unexpectedly, and had done no planning in advance, and literally his family had no idea about anything. He had done everything, and it took them months to go through his office and go through, and they would just have to depend on what came in the mail to find assets, and they didn't know what money they had. And after that experience, the other 50% partner kind of observed it, and he said, I don't want that to happen to me. And so he recognized that he needed to plan for his ultimate demise. He searched through his choices, and he ended up identifying a son-in-law who he thought had the skill set to learn that business, even though he had never worked in that business before. And he brought him in to shadow him. And for about 5 years, we say in Texas, he rode around in the truck with him for 5 years. You know what I'm talking about, even in New York. Yes. Anyway, he rode around in the truck with him, and lo and behold, this other partner was in a terrible plane crash and unexpectedly died. And the son-in-law seamlessly continued the business. It's an incredibly successful business in Texas, and it was all because the patriarch there had the foresight to do some planning. A lot of business owners think they're indispensable. You think, what keeps you from doing this? And they say, well, I'm indispensable. There's nobody who can fill my shoes. And I heard once a quote from Charles de Gaulle, and he said, cemeteries are full of indispensable people. Yeah. So I guess the next natural question that comes up is, at what point should a company be thinking of succession planning? Well, I think that it's never too early. And here I'm going to share a personal story with you about why that I feel that way so strongly. Because there's this common myth that most people operate under, that I'll get around to this later. I've got time. I'll deal with it later. And about a year ago, my brother suddenly became sick. He felt like his foot was broken, and he went to the hospital, and a few days later they said, you have pancreatic cancer. And 2 weeks later, he was gone. And this is from a 65-year-old fellow who was seemingly completely healthy, and we all thought he had many, many, many years ahead of him. And lo and behold, he was ripped away from us with about 2 weeks after his terribly tragic diagnosis. And it taught me some important lessons as an estate planning lawyer, but one of them that really rings loud and clear is you don't always have as much time as you think you have. You have no idea what tomorrow is. And I know that firsthand. And we had a family business, and he was so young and healthy, we had not gotten around to figuring out all of the details of what would happen when he was gone. And miraculously, my mother, who is 87 years old,
God bless,
and smarter than anybody I've ever known in my life, and still 100% clear-headed and with it, she came out of retirement. She'd retired 15 years ago. She came out of retirement, went full-time back in, and took a 1-year time period to run and then ultimately wind down that business.
That's unreal.
She's the only one who could have done it. If we had not had her, we don't know what we would have done. Miraculously, though, thank God she had the capability to step in, but that's living dangerously. We just had no idea that so I cannot stress strongly enough that getting started now is the right time now.
My guest this evening is none other than Marvin Blum, founding partner at the Blum Firm. He's again, many in the industry and the attorneys are familiar with Marvin. In case you're not, you can just Google his name and you'll see why we were so excited to have Marvin on the show. Thank you for joining me here on Mind Your Business.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Marvin, question. You identified the obvious to a degree, which is why people push this off, push succession planning off, because, we'll be around for a while, and, some of us think we'll be around forever. Are there any other obstacles that you would say that are out there, why people push off transition planning?
Well, I think that most of the reason is psychological. I think that for founders of businesses, it becomes very hard for them to face the prospect that they won't be here one day. There's this belief that most of them have that I think that they feel like they'll live forever. And it's very hard for them to confront reality that they won't be here one day. And I think, too, that they worry about what their life will be like after they would transition out of a business and would their life suddenly become empty and boring, and what will we, and so it helps to consider the psychological aspects of this planning. This is not just documentation. There's a lot of psychology involved in this. And I think in a lot of families, they worry about family dysfunction and what will this open up? Is it sort of, are we opening a can of worms here? Am I going to create friction among my family members when I create this plan? But my point about that is better to address those issues while the patriarch and matriarch are alive and able to provide the family with some wisdom and some glue than for the family to have to wrestle through those things when patriarch and matriarch are not here. So those are some of the reasons. And I think another is the cost. I mean, a lot of people get very worried about what it's going to cost. But I think it's more expensive not to do it than to do it.
Now, take, for example, a business, a company that's doing relatively well, and the second generation's coming in, not the third generation yet, but the second generation, and the matriarch, the patriarch, they're around, they're running it, they're in their 50s and their 60s, and the young generation's coming in. Does your firm also deal with that, or it's only the fact that once the matriarch and patriarch are out of the picture?
Oh, we deal with it at all points on the timeline, and earlier the better. But the fact is, we much prefer to get started on this kind of planning when you have the input and the buy-in of the matriarch, the patriarch, and all the stakeholders in the business. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But it's important to get this ball rolling early and get the input of all the important stakeholders in the business. I think it's important in all of this to manage expectations. I think when people enter into this, they think that, maybe there's some form I can sign that will take care of this. Well, let me tell you, in this area of planning, there are no forms. This is not a will. This one's a lot harder, and you have to prepare people to understand it's going to take longer, and there will be no perfect answers.
So if you take a business like so many that I'm sure you've been dealing with, it's a healthy, thriving business. It involves a lot of moving parts. And let's say when you enter, there is already an element of friction in the business. Are there any simple answers for that?
Well, and friction is normal. Let me tell you, every family has it. I have never seen a family that doesn't have to deal with some level of friction. And to me, it's important to deal with it and not to sweep it under the rug. And when you put together the planning team for this, and this is generally a team of advisors, not just your lawyer only, but a team that it includes people on there like people that the family has had a relationship with for a while, like maybe their longtime accountant and a financial advisor. And but you want somebody on there who has some understanding of psychology. A business consultant with some psychology background is very valuable in this because they are equipped to handle friction and diffuse it before it erupts. You don't want a volcano to erupt here. You want somebody who knows how to handle families and all the family dynamics. And trust me, your family is not the only one. Every family has these difficult dynamics. So it's putting together the right team to handle it.
And it's great advice you're sharing, because I'm sure so many have, entered like, my situation is much worse than everyone else's, but you're talking reality. This is what it is. It's important to know that this is the atmosphere, and therefore let's move forward trying to make things work out. Let's not, as you said, sweep things under the rug, or let's play. I've had another person that said, he has a great line. He says, don't play make-believe with me. Don't play make-believe. Mm-hmm. Let's put everything on the table, spell out the facts. Let's talk, as there's a Yiddish saying, let's talk tachlis.
I get it.
Let's
let's get the MS out here.
Yeah, let's get the MS out. Yeah. Exactly. I heard a line from an advisor in this area his name is Matt Wesley, and he said it's important for the founder of a business to move from being the quarterback to being the coach. And that's a tough transition, but they're accustomed to serving as quarterback of the team, and it's time to train a new quarterback, and you move into the role of being the coach and coaching that guy, so that guy or that gal who can then take over the business when you're no longer here and not available to coach. Yeah. I remember reading a book years ago by John Maxwell, a great author, where he really talked about certain, even in corporations, which is a different dynamic naturally, but where certain CEOs prepared their successor, and of course the business continued to thrive, and others that, maybe it was an ego drive or whatever the case is, and they were like, wanted to prove to the world that it would just collapse, and guess what?
Well, let me tell you, the statistics in this area are very sobering. It's about 90% of businesses don't make it to the third generation in a family.
Wow.
Only about 10% of businesses manage to survive from generation to generation. That's daunting statistics. And if you want to be one of those 10%ers, then we can learn lessons from what they've done, and you copy from them. Right. But the main thing that they do is they plan.
Now, if I may, just another interesting question. Are there times when you look at all the data and you say, you know what, it would be best in this case to sell as opposed to moving it through the next generation?
Absolutely. And you don't want to hit a family business owner with the idea of selling his business too early, because again, these are psychological issues. And remember, this business is like a baby to this family member. Yeah. It's like a member of the family. But the reality is, you have to really be very honest about who is suited to take over this business. And you look at all the possibilities and all the family dynamics, and you think, hey, I'm going to be out of the picture. I'm not going to be here to be the peacemaker anymore. Right. And if indeed there isn't a good recipe for transition within the family, then go ahead and address the tough one, and that is let's sell this business before it becomes a burden on the family. Let me share a story about a successful family that I read about. It's the Pack Paper Company out of Vancouver, Washington, and they make paper sleeves for coffee cups.
Okay.
And it was a family business. It had been in the family for 40 years. And the fellow running it, the son of the founder, always imagined that the business would pass down to the next generation.
Right.
But he all of a sudden one day got an unsolicited offer from a competitor to buy his business at a very, very good price. And it caused him to stop and think. He'd never imagined selling the company. But when he got that offer, he surveyed the landscape and he became honest with himself. He said, I really don't have a member of this family who's suitable to take it over. And he ended up accepting the offer and selling the company because he realized for the long run that was the thing that was best for the family.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.